I believe we are a go and we're live. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Suddenly it's October again. Not sure what's going on out there, but anyway, welcome in. I'm Bruce Williams. I'm the CEO of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. You'll meet our guest in just a moment for our session today on what you need to know about running for council and running for elected office. I'd like to acknowledge, first of all, that I live and work in the ancestral territory of the Lekwungen-speaking nations, the Songhees and the Esquimalt. It's a privilege and honor to live and work alongside them every single day. Welcome to Air Meet, which is the platform that we're on right now. Um, Check out the different tabs on the right-hand side of your screen, okay? That's to see the different options for interacting with us today. To highlight a few of them, you can connect with other attendees through the People tab. Questions will be answered all through this presentation. If you have a question, please use the Q&A, the question and answer tab, to ask it, or you can defer those until the end of Allison's presentation. This allows us to put that question up on screen, and others can participate and upvote it. You can also use the chat function to chat generally with other attendees in this meeting today. So today we're going to offer some transparency on what being a mayor or a councillor entails, ensuring that potential candidates are better informed about what to expect when elected, making better community representatives. We have said for a long time that maybe when people are actually elected to office, they need to take a course. They need to take a little session to understand better what their responsibilities are. So in a sense, this is what we're doing today to help people better prepare themselves. So we welcome you all to this event. Thank you for your interest in municipal councils and how they operate. Through the presentation today and following the Q&A, Allison is going to answer key questions to help inform candidates and the general public of what makes good municipal candidates and councils. She's going to share her own experience as well from being a councillor and a mayor. And for those of you who are here rather because you're not running for office, you can learn today what you can expect from candidates and from individuals when they are elected. So it's an opportunity to learn, leave your politics, leave your personal priorities, leave your campaign platforms at the door today, if you would please. So, without further ado, let's carry on here. I would like to introduce you to our guest speaker, Allison Habkirk. We have brought Allison in because the Chamber, of course, works, we advocate with government for things that we feel matter, especially when it comes to the business community. We want candidates and elected officials to make informed decisions. We want them to make sure that their own credentials are in line with what we are asking of them and that they understand the decisions that they make and the impact that they have. Allison has 30 years of experience in local government as a professional, as an elected official, and as an educator. She is a registered planner. She's worked as a staff planner, a consultant, and a trainer for local governments, for the province of BC, and for the Local Government Management Association. She's also the author of several publications on local government topics and maintains a very keen interest in leadership development, elected official and staff training, strategic planning, and small town planning. She is an adjunct professor in the School of Public Admin at the University of Victoria. She's an instructor with Capilano University and served as a program manager for the Local Government Leadership Academy, the LGLA. Allison also in the past has served both mayor and councillor roles with the District of Central Saanich for 3 terms in office. Lots of knowledge and perspective to share with you today. So, Allison Habkirk, thank you for joining us. Welcome, and the floor is yours.
Super. Thanks, Bruce, and welcome everybody. And I just want to say I'm just really feel very fortunate to be able to be working with your chamber and to be able to offer a little glimpse into the world of local politics, particularly in the Greater Victoria region. I'll just say as a start, my presentation is kind of a mixture of what I would call hard information, maybe a lot of it sort of boring. But you know, if you're going to run for office, you spend a lot of time in meetings and not all this stuff is super, super exciting. So this is a little bit of training for that. And then also just some experience from my own life experience as an elected official, which was three terms of office, as Bruce mentioned, and in working with councils across the province. So a little bit of mixture of information and advice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and we'll sort of work through some slides, but I do hope that you will ask questions because this will be way more interesting if there's a bit of back and forth rather than just me, you know, blah, blah, blahing. And please feel free to put your questions in the chat or raise your hand. And if I don't see you, then I'm hoping that Ashley or Bruce will bring your question to my attention. So here we go. just take a second for this to load. I'm assuming everybody can see that. Maybe Thomas, if you could, or tech person, if you can just give me a thumbs up of some kind, or let me know if you can't see it. The first thing I really want to offer you is that, you know what, in my view, being an elected official is it's a tough job these days. It's tougher, I think, than it's ever been. And I think you really want to gird yourself for that. And it these days takes a lot of hard work, a lot of resilience, thick-skinned for sure, kindness, I hope a belief in service to others, and it takes checking your ego, you know, managing to manage your ego. I think it takes a certain amount of ego to actually stand up and run for office, so it's not all bad, but you really have to learn to manage that. And maybe more than anything else, you have to find a way to work with people that you don't like and you don't agree with. This is so not like you can fire anybody. You know, these people are in just like you are. They're elected by the citizens, and you may not like them, but you really need to find a way to work with people that you might not agree with. Yeah, so the bad news is that in Canada, this is a survey from Angus Reid from 2019. It's the most recent data that I could find. But sadly, nearly 64% of the people surveyed say they can't trust their elected officials. I mean, how depressing is that? And 32% of those surveyed believe that elected officials are motivated by personal gain rather than by a genuine desire to serve their communities. We're kind of in a sad state, I think, here. And I think part of the job of being an elected official in local government is try to build public trust, try to help people to feel that you're trustworthy and that their council really is working for them. Now, the good news is that local government fares better than federal and provincial governments. So on balance, people trust local government elected officials more than they trust their federal and provincial elected officials. And I think that's probably because you're closer to them. And I mean, that's really the beauty of local government. You often hear them say that local government is the government closest to the people. And it is, in that you actually have an opportunity to meet and interact and talk to your citizens and the people that elected you. So local government's in a slightly better position, but still it's kind of a sad commentary on the state of our democratic system in Canada. If you're thinking about running for council, you probably have lots of questions, and surely the first one is, well, why would you take this on? Like, why would you do this? I mean, really, and you ought to really think about that question. You also have probably all kinds of practical questions, which I'm hoping we're going to touch on in this brief presentation. Of course, you could take a year-long course on local government, but just you know, what do municipalities and regional districts do? What are they supposed to be doing? And where does the authority come from? And if you get elected, how do you actually get stuff done anyways? And what does the council do? What does the staff do? So a whole bunch of different questions rolling around. And again, you know, I'm happy to respond to any questions that you might have that we don't cover. And later on, I'm always at the end of the phone. If you want to give me a call, I'm happy to lend a hand. But best that you sort of get your questions out there and think about them before you actually declare you're going to run. So first of all, ask yourself, why am I running for council? And you know, on the positive side, I think, and it's my experience, particularly in small town British Columbia, and I've worked for upwards of 60 different municipalities across the province. Most elected officials on councils in BC, they come to the job for all the right reasons. They really want to contribute to the community. Often they feel the community's been very good to them and they want to give back. They just want to do something positive. You might think that being an elected official is an honorable role to play in your community. It sounds kind of old-fashioned now, but that was one of my motivations. I really believe that our democratic systems really need people to participate and to step up, and so that was part of my motivation. The other motivation I had was I wanted to be a role model, particularly for my children. I had young children at the time, and I wanted them to see me actually participating in a very real way. Like their mother went off every Monday night for a council meeting, and then they got up to all kinds of trouble with their father. But yeah, I wanted them to see me actually contributing to the democratic government that we all benefit from. You might also think that you might also really believe that you need good people in government. Maybe you want to lead change in your community. Maybe things aren't going the direction you'd like them to be, and you want to contribute. Maybe you have some particular skill or expertise that you think you can bring to the table. In my case, I was a community planner, so I thought, I might know a thing or two. Well, it was a rude awakening when I got to the table, because the job was quite different than what I thought it was. But there are all kinds of good reasons for running for council, and I think many elected officials across BC, these are the kinds of reasons that are on their mind. And I encourage you to really think about what's motivating you. Now, having said that, I think there are some particularly bad reasons for running for council, and I'm not the only person that said these things. There's some really great articles out on social media these days about why you shouldn't run for or reasons you should not run for a council. And first of all, if you're just mad as heck at the incumbents and that's really what's motivating you, it's probably not enough to hold you motivated for 4 years. If you just have one project in mind, you want a park built, you want a road built, you want a rec center built, again, you will be responsible for all kinds of things. And probably you'll find it not very satisfying if you're just focused on one particular project. If you need the money, that this is not a good motivation. And I'll tell you, and I did a little research to get some data from across the capital region. And, the highest paid councillor, I think, is in Saanich, and their compensation is $48,000. The lowest paid councillor is in, I think, the Highlands, which is 9,000. So this is, and when I was elected, I think it was about 6,000. I mean, this is not a money-making job. Money should not be your motivation. It's not a good business decision. Let me put it that way. It's a job of service, not one that's going to line your bank account for sure. Another reason not to run for council is if you think government can run just like a business, because I'm here to tell you that if you run government like a business, you're not going to have a fire department, because the fire department's not generating any revenue. It's a much more complex organization than a business is. And you have to weigh all of these values in making your choices, both the value of, efficiency and economy for taxpayers and all those kinds of things, but also the social and other values that your citizens have in their minds. You might think that being a councillor is a really easy job, and I can do that. It's how hard can it be? But again, I'm here to persuade you that it is a tough job, and weighing all of these values and weighing really tough decisions can really wear on you. You might think it'll help your business. Well, probably not. You're going to make lots of enemies in the time that you're in council. And I know I still have some of those from my time. There's still people who just think I'm a horrible person. Not always a good business decision. And if you want to help your sponsors, well, fortunately in BC, we have lots of really good legislative protections around conflict of interest and showing favor. And so that's probably not going to really be helpful to you either. So those are some reasons for not running for council. I just want to sort of give you a little bit of information, and this is where the boring stuff really starts. So where does local government get its powers anyways? Like how do councils come to have some kind of authority to act? And it really starts with the Constitution Act, Section 92 of the Constitution Act, that delegates all authority for local government to the provinces. And so the provinces really hold the authority for local governments. And you'll often hear people say that local governments are a creature of the province. And that is exactly the case. The province creates this legislation that then, this isn't probably the right legal term, but for all intents and purposes, delegates authority to local governments to do certain things. So, but it's all sort of laid out, starting with the Constitution Act. And then we have a series of provincial legislation that governs local governments. And I've just chosen to highlight two here because there are two principal pieces of provincial legislation that local governments gain their authority from. One is the Community Charter and one is the Local Government Act. And the Community Charter really gives authority to local governments, and the Local Government Act retains some authorities that are specific to land use planning, regional districts, and elections. And the reason we have two acts where other provinces in BC have one is that some of you might be aware that we went through a period of reform, both with the NDP government and the Liberal government, with Gordon Campbell's government, lastly, to reform local government legislation. They created the Community Charter, and the next step was to reform the Local Government Act, but I think everybody was exhausted, and so they never got there. So it has been, the Local Government Act has been reformed, but internally it's never been folded into the Community Charter. So those are the two big acts that address authority for local governments in BC. And you will, if you're elected, you will invariably have to become familiar with parts of those two pieces of legislation. So what do municipalities do anyways? They really have two principal roles. One is to deliver services, and one is to provide a mechanism for governance for people to express their points of view. So for councils or for citizens to speak to their councils and tell them what they want, and elect the kind of councils that they want. So delivering services and providing a governance mechanism. And then I just thought I would touch just briefly on what do regional districts do. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, but they enable, more than anything else, enable jurisdictions that member municipalities and electoral areas to provide services in partnerships. That was one of the primary motivations for creating regional districts. They also provide some direct services themselves, and then they have a bunch of administrative functions that they carry out. In my view, regional districts are really generally misunderstood by citizens, by elected officials, and by the media. They're not an order of government, they're a federation. It's where all of the municipalities and electoral areas of the Greater Victoria area come together to work together on various services and initiatives. And it is this mechanism that allows them to make these partnership arrangements. So you're probably aware of things like recreation services in my area in the peninsula. Sydney, North Saanich, and Central Saanich share the delivery of a recreation center. And it's the mechanism of the CRD that actually allows us to do that. It's very awkward to do that outside of the CRD. And I just want to drop this one little bit of information that almost all regional district services are voluntary. Municipalities opt in. So Sydney, North Saanich, and Central Saanich agreed to come together to form a recreation center. Nobody told them to do that. So it is largely a voluntary arrangement. The services are largely voluntary arrangements. The Community Charter, again, this big piece of provincial legislation, this is actually what it says local governments are supposed to do. You're supposed to provide good government, service laws, and other matters for community benefit, stewardship of public assets. So you probably know that there's a lot of focus on managing and maintaining public assets. Now, you know, asset management, it's a big deal for municipalities. It's a big expense for municipalities right now. And then fostering economic, social, and well-being of the community. And regional districts, again, what does legislation say they do? They're service providers, they're administrative agencies, and they're federations. And they derive their authority not from the province, but from the member municipalities. Again, this is a federation, not an order of government. So I'm going to just sort of run through some topics that I hope you will find interesting. This is my version of Council 101. Again, a mixture of some hard information and some advice based on experience. You ought to know that if you get elected, you have to swear an oath. These are a couple of little quotes from the existing oath, and the oath is just in the process of being revised. The legislature in the fall passed legislation to revise the oath. It's not going to be substantially different, but you have to swear an oath. And if you are unwilling to swear an oath to your role of service to your community, it's cause for disqualification. So, and there have been some very interesting cases around this topic. So you might want to make sure that you feel comfortable with doing that. And you know, one part of the oath is that you swear that you will you'll act in accordance with the law, that you will not do anything illegal. So that's kind of an important thing, kind of something that you want of your elected officials. So stay tuned on this. I don't think the regulation has come down from the province, but very shortly, it must be imminent. We'll have a new oath of office, and you will have to you'll have to swear it. You might also have heard of this topic about responsible conduct. You've probably for sure heard discussions in the media about irresponsible conduct or poor conduct on the part of local government elected officials. So for the last 5 years or so, the province, the Union of British Columbia Municipalities, and the Local Government Management Association have been working together to try to provide some support for elected officials and to encourage responsible conduct. So these are the 4 foundational principles of responsible conduct. They are the foundation of all of the work that this group has been doing over the last 5 years. And you can see here these 4 key principles: integrity, accountability, respect, and leadership and collaboration. This is the very foundation of good behavior of elected officials in local governments in BC. And this, after the election, all municipalities are going to have to consider creating a code of conduct. And you've probably, again, seen some discussion in the media about this recently, because there are communities that don't think it's necessary, and that's fine. They have that choice, but they will be required to at least have a council discussion about establishing a code of conduct to lay out expectations for behavior for their council members. And this will be, any code of conduct, I expect, will be rooted in these 4 principles. All of this information is available online at the Union of BC Municipalities website or the Province of BC Ministry of Municipal Affairs website. So there's some very good resources out there, and I know the ministry is just preparing some new resources that prior to the election will be available, as is EBCM, including there's going to be a short self-directed online course focused on the foundational principles of responsible conduct. So there'll be some good opportunities to learn more about that. So in my view, what does it take to be a successful member of council? Well, you know, it takes really good listening skills. And I think this is really, it's a hard thing to develop, to be honest. And you know, it's easy to say, it's harder to do. And I think there was a question about how do we, it's a good question from one of the participants today about how do we have less acrimonious debate around tough topics on councils. And really, I think in many ways it comes down to listening, is to really, you don't have to agree with people, but you have to work at really hearing what they're saying and really actively listening. And I think all of the good councillors and mayors that I've worked with, they have really well developed listening skills that they really, if you're talking to them, you really feel that you've been heard. And that's the first step, I think, in building trust, and that you're not just dismissed or they cut you off and you're they disagree with you, but really, really listening to what people say. I'll tell you, you need an ability to process a lot of information. And if you go and look at the agendas of your typical council meeting, hundreds of pages, sometimes 1,000 pages, you really need to be able to process that information, to triage it, to figure out what you really need to spend time on. What you can just trust is solid information. But you need to be able to process that information and to analyze it and then, you know, formulate an opinion. You ought to have a commitment to upholding the law. It's the second time I've referred to that, but I think it's, you know, it's worth repeating that, you know, this is a government position. You are there with the trust of the public. And you, even if you don't like it, you need to be prepared to uphold the law of the province and of the country. I think you need a commitment to the foundational principles of responsible conduct. And that means being able to work with your fellow members of council with respect, to show and demonstrate integrity in your behavior and in your decision making. You ought to have high ethical principles because, again, I would hope that that's what citizens expect of us. It takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of time. Somebody, one of the participants before the session began, asked how much time does it take? But it depends a lot on the municipality that you're elected in. But it takes more time than you probably think it does. And you need to do just the actual work, the reading, the attending meetings. It's more than just a council meeting. There are often committee of the whole meetings. If you sit on the CRD, there's those meetings. There will be committee meetings, advisory committee meetings. And then there's just talking to your constituents. So it does take a lot of time. In the smaller communities, part-time. In the couple of big communities, I would expect these jobs are more or less full-time jobs. You certainly could be a full-time job. You need the ability to work with others, really, like to really be able to work with people who you don't like and who don't like you, and who really have a very different point of view, ideological point of view, so not likely to change. You need to find ways to cooperate and to collaborate, because in the end, you're making collective decisions. And, you know, they're not going to be unanimous decisions. There's not going to be consensus. You know, I'm not naive about that. But you need to find ways to actually collaborate. So you need good negotiation skills. You need to find ways to seek the middle ground or to seek compromise, find something that people can agree to. And again, I think the people, particularly the mayors that I worked with, and I was fortunate enough to work with some really terrific mayors, the ones that were really skilled were the ones that could move a group towards a decision that they felt would be successful, that would survive a vote. So having those kinds of negotiation skills, those kind of soft leadership skills, and can be really, really critical in your success as a member of council. I was just going to touch on, what's governance, because people say, well, the role of elected official is governance. So let me just sort of simplify it. This is my view of things. I figure there's four kind of buckets of responsibilities in being an elected official at the local level. One is you set the strategic direction of the community. So through a strategic plan, through an official community plan, through the long-term financial plans of the corporation. And I should say, municipalities are corporations. So that's why I use that word. So you set the strategic direction. That really is the role of the council. And then, once you've done that, again, through the official community plan, the strategic plan, the annual budgets, the longer term financial, like capital plans, then you allocate the resources, and you do this really through, the annual budgets. And you're allocating both the financial resources and the human resources of the corporation. So, the budget has to be passed by the council. And that's a very big part of your responsibility because, of course, it identifies what you're going to put resources into and what you're not going to put resources into. And I'm here to tell you, you never have enough money, right? So you have to make these really, really tough choices. Is it affordable housing? Is it a park? Is it a new water line? Is it replacing a road? They're tough choices to make. And then you have this oversight and reporting role. So your role is to provide oversight to the chief administrative officer or the city manager, and to report out through an annual report every year to your constituents. And then the fourth area of responsibility is managing risk. And this might include the legal risks of the organization or the asset management risks. If you have a bridge that's come to the end of its life or a building or a road that's come to the end of its life, managing the risk and making choices. So those are the four big areas of responsibility for a council. I like to say that councils are stewards of their municipalities. They look after the municipality for a period of time. Sorry, I'm just reading a question here. I'll get to that in 2 seconds. The careful and responsible management is something entrusted to one's care. And there were stewards before you, and there'll be stewards after you. But you kind of hold the community in your hands through the period of time that you're an elected official. That's what the citizens have asked you to do. Question is, you stress the need for upholding the law as well as high ethical principles. Sometimes bad laws or decisions impact citizens negatively. How are we expected to resolve these? Well, it depends a bit on whether the law is within your area of authority. So if it's a law that you have, like a zoning category or something, then you have complete authority to change that. If it's a law that it is, say, a provincial law or a federal law, you can advocate for its change. And that's probably the most productive way to deal with it. But you're treading on thin ice if you decide you're going to break the law or ignore the law. So in your own realm of authority, change the law. Outside of your realm of authority, advocate for change. Good question, though. So you can see just how challenging that could be on a personal level if you're confronted with a law that you think is fundamentally wrong, and you have to make some kind of choice about whether or not you're going to abide by it. Yeah, you just get a taste of just how challenging the job can be. So I just was going to give you a couple of examples of what you're stewarding, just to give you the magnitude of the job. And I just chose Saanich because I think Saanich has the biggest budget in the region. So the total expenses of Saanich last year were $207 million. Have I got that right? I think I've got that right. it is a huge organization with huge expenditures and a huge number of employees. And you are ultimately responsible, again, for the strategic direction, allocating the budget, reporting out to constituencies, and managing the risk in this organization. I would argue that this is not a job you do off the side of your desk. And then at the other end of the spectrum, oh, sorry, I just want to mention too, this is from the 2021 annual report, which would be the last report available. And if you're thinking of running for council and you want a great sort of window into the world of your municipality, go and read the annual reports. When I go to do work in a community, the first thing I do is I read the official community plan, and then I read the annual report. It gives you a fantastic picture of what they're doing, what their priorities are, and all the financial statements are attached to them as well. So and they're online in all of the municipalities, so they're super easy to access. So at the other end of the spectrum, I just chose Highlands because I think it has the smallest budget. So their budget is, expenses are just over $3 million, or $3.2 million. And in 2021, yeah, and year ending 2021. So obviously much smaller organization, but in many ways no less complex, because they have, their resources are so tight. Every expenditure really matters. And there are very tough decisions to be made in the small communities just because the dollars are so stretched. So even though it's a much smaller amount, still a really, really challenging job for elected officials around the table in a place like Highlands. So that's kind of the, the range of budgets across the province and everything in between. Shared and collective decision making. I think one of the hardest things for local governments to, or for elected officials to kind of really adjust to is, here you're out there, you campaign, you tell people to vote for you, you're the best person, you tell everybody that you know exactly what you're doing, and then you get elected and you pretty quickly find out that there are a lot of things that you don't know, and you have to learn really quickly. And also that you don't have any independent authority. You only have authority as a part of the collective council, that all council decisions are made by council, not by individuals, and that you can't go and direct staff, you can't decide something's going to get done. Everything has to be done at the council table in a collective, and that's quite a challenging adjustment to make, I think, to go from being an individual to being a collective. And I've seen this. I've seen how challenging it can be, especially for, kind of strong-minded people. I'd include myself in that group. And all of a sudden, yeah, you're mayor, but you only have one vote out of 7. And you really have to learn to work with people. Another question, would you consider climate collapse coming under the heading managing risk? Well, for sure, local governments these days, it's all about resiliency. It's all about, planning for things like, in one local community I'm aware of, they have a sewer pump station right on the foreshore. Well, with sea level rise, in very short order, that pump station is going to be underwater. So it needs to be moved. And, I think every municipality in BC is turning their minds to this, to the risks of climate change. And there's been some really fantastic work done in this area. City of Surrey has done some amazing work in this area of managing risks. And, these are not black and white questions. It's about, well, okay, what's your risk tolerance? How much risk can we keep? Can we take on? And how much money can we spend to reduce the risk? So yes, I would say that that's, in my view, that's one of the risks that it certainly is front and center for most municipalities these days. Good question. What does council do? What does staff do? Council sets the direction. They have authority to make all the decisions. All of the high order decisions rest with them, and ultimately the responsibility rests with councils for the operation of the organization. Really, the buck stops at council. Staff has two roles. They offer professional advice, and then they implement council decisions. They're not decision makers. On a day-to-day basis, of course, and doing their work, they're decision makers, but they're not policy makers. The policy making is all done at the council table. And then I think the public has a role. Their role is to stay informed and to participate. And, sadly, that's not going so well for us. The average voter turnout in British Columbia last year was about 36%. In my own municipality, I think the voter turnout was about 26%. They're not engaged. The citizens are not engaged, and the majority of them often don't elect the council, which is, really problematic for us. So I think part of the responsibility of councils these days is to really engage the public and to really promote them to come out and vote and to know what's going on in municipalities. I was just going to touch on this. Most municipalities, virtually all municipalities in British Columbia work under the system called the council manager system, where you have the citizens elect the council. The council hires a chief administrative officer, sometimes called a city manager, and then that administrative officer oversees all the operations. Council's not involved in the operations at all. They set direction. They identify that, the budgets, what's to be worked on, and then the chief administrative officer implements it. And the council in our system doesn't direct the department heads, doesn't tell the garbage guy where to go, doesn't tell the backhoe where to dig a hole in a road. That's all done, and ultimately the responsibility of the chief administrative officer. Now, what the council does do, they provide oversight for the performance of the CAO. And in our system, and I'm happy to say this is my bias, we have really, for all intents and purposes, a nonpartisan public service in local government in Canada. And CAOs in local government in BC all have to comply with the Code of Ethics of the Local Government Management Association. They're trained on ethics, and part of that is a nonpartisan service. So I was super lucky in my time in office that I had an amazing chief administrative officer who was fantastic. I saw him, and I've lived in my own community for about 30 years. I saw him serve half a dozen different councils of very different stripes, and he did an honorable job and was devoted to every council. And this is a very important part of our system in my mind, and I'd like to see it stay that way, that we don't politicize our staff. And I think we're all served well by this kind of principle of nonpartisan public service. How to get stuff done. All decisions have to meet at the council table. They all have to get onto an agenda. All decisions of council are made by resolution or a bylaw, and all decisions must be voted on by council. And typically they're voted on with just a simple majority vote. It's a whole different matter at the regional district where the votes are weighted, but the decisions can't be made in the shadows. They need to be made in the public view. There's a fundamental principle of our government is the public should be able to see the decision making, the sausage making. I was just going to touch on what in camera means. It means that the meeting is out of view of the public. So the starting point in our legislation is that all meetings of council must be held in public, and then there are some exceptions. And the exceptions really have to do with labor and personnel, legal and litigation. So if you're getting legal advice about an action in the courts, then obviously you want to protect your interests, and that can be done outside of the view of the public. And then there are certain land decisions, not zoning would not be included in that. But if you're going to acquire a piece of land and you're discussing putting a bid on buying a piece of land, that kind of information can be held in camera. Everything else has to be done within the view of the public. Just a little heads up about what constitutes a meeting. The ombudsperson, I can't remember when it's done. It was done in the last couple of years. No, it was longer than that. Had a lot of queries about what actually constitutes a meeting. If you're going to the pub after a council meeting and you've got 5 or 7 councillors there and you're talking about the topic of the council meeting, you know, that just might constitute a meeting, and there's a risk that whatever decision would be vulnerable by a challenge. So again, the ombudsperson has a very good document on what constitutes a meeting, what's an open meeting, what should be in a closed meeting, and I encourage you to sort of have some awareness of that. You always have your corporate officer who's super knowledgeable about this kind of thing to give you advice, but you ought to be aware that you're not to be making decisions in the shadows. Actually, oh yeah, thank you for the question. Local governments struggle to take sufficiently bold action to tackle critical issues such as housing, affordability, and climate change. Why is that, and what can new potential candidates do to better prepare themselves to address these challenges? Well, I think that everybody that comes to elective office feels, whether it's federal, provincial, or local, feels that it takes too long to make decisions. And it can be really frustrating, but you don't want your governments to be making rash decisions that aren't based on really good research and really good science. And so that's a big part of it, is this research, data, analysis part of decision making. Really, you want to invest the time that is that will really lead you to solid decisions. But the other part of it probably is, you know, is also that you need to bring the public along, or you need to ensure that the public are with you in making the decisions. So the public's not always with you making really bold decisions, particularly when it comes to change. So there's a dance to be done there, I think. And again, this probably goes to, you know, if you have a council of 7 or 9, you're going to have a real range of opinions, and some are going to be at the extremes and some are going to be in the center. And you might be at an extreme and think this needs to be done tomorrow, and others think it doesn't need any attention at all. And some in the middle think, yeah, maybe in the next 5 years. So, you know, there's just a lot of work to be done, and a lot of negotiating to be done, and a lot of consulting with the public to be done. So I'm not sure that's an easy question to answer, but I would suggest that it's harder to do this than you think. It's harder to sit around a table with 7 or 9 people and come to agreement about taking, you know, really bold action, because there won't be agreement on the need, and there won't be agreement on what the public thinks. Yeah, it's a good example of why it's so challenging to be an elected official, I think. So I think, you know, my advice to you is, you feel strongly about things, you get elected, you take your case to the group and try to be persuasive, and work very hard to bring others around the council to your point of view. And then also work with the public to bring them along if they're not there. If they're there, if the public, you know, is really feels strongly, the majority of feel strongly, and that's what all of council is hearing, then you probably won't have too much difficulty making bold decisions. But if they're not there, then part of the job is bringing them along too. And I think, you know, something like climate change or homelessness, some of these really tough issues, not easy to deal with. They're good examples of where you might very well need to bring the public along. I won't go into conflict of interest too much, but you ought to be aware that we have good legislation in the province about conflicts of interest. There's been lots of litigation around this. It's pretty clear that your self-interest is not cannot be part of your decision making, and if you breach any of the laws or found to be guilty of this, then it's cause for disqualification for office. One of the very few causes for disqualification in BC, and there was in fact a councillor in North Saanich disqualified maybe about 20 years ago. So it's definitely an area that you want to be aware of, and you might want to be aware of before you decide to run, to make sure that you're not going to find yourself in trouble. For example, if you have a company that does a lot of contract work with the municipality, then you're going to have to somehow separate yourself from that, and so that it doesn't color your decision making. What's the time commitment? I made a reference to this previously, but it takes a lot of time. You need to devote the time to reading agendas, reports. There's a lot of reading. You need to be really organized, and you become very quickly visible, and people want to talk to you. And grocery shopping takes way longer than you think it is. When my kids and I used to go grocery shopping, they never thought it was about grocery shopping. They thought it was about talking to people. So it really it's a real intrusion into your private life, and you ought to be prepared for that. Collaboration, actively listen, respect diversity, value all points of view. Really, I mean, others who don't share your points of view are elected just like you are, and you really need to respect them even if you don't agree with them. I think it serves council well to agree to expectations around staff, expectations about what you're going to do in your term of office, so that you have that collective starting point. And same with priorities. Most councils these days go through some kind of priority setting or strategic planning exercise at the beginning of the term, and so that you agree to them. And it's not everybody agrees to them, but the majority agree to the priorities, and then you lay out a plan for the 4 years, and that really helps staff pace their work, understand what the priorities of council are, and to lay out a plan for the 4-year term. Diversity around council tables is just super important these days. You need a gender, ethnic blend around the council table. If it's too lopsided in any direction, you're not representing your constituents. We all come from really diverse municipalities, and they ought to in some way be represented on the council. And if for some reason the council is not diverse, then I think it's it's the responsibility of the council to find ways to incorporate those groups in their community that are not represented, at the council table. I think it really takes an extra measure of that. So we're all stronger if more of us are represented. I just wanted to just touch on this. Councils go through this. This is from the world of sociology, a group dynamic kind of process. You form, you come together, you're 7 or 9 individuals, you begin to form a group, and then you have a wrestle, you're storming. There's a period of storming that you try to really find ways to work together, and you create these norms about how you're going to work together, and then you can really perform. And then before you know it, 4 years later, you're adjourning. But lots of councils get stuck in that storming phase and they never get out of it. And that really hampers their ability to perform. I encourage you to know your moral compass and your values, because they will be tested in your time on council. Really encourage you to take time to know your official community plan. It is the dominant driving document in your community. It's a super powerful document. Lots of communities in our region have just completed a revision of the official community plan. It might not seem like it's the most important document to read, but I really encourage you to spend some time and look at it. And if you're lucky enough to have a process going on in your community right now, you should be, take the time to be a part of that process. And I just want to quickly show you this. This is from Squamish. You can see that the official community plan drives, what they do as a council. It drives the council strategic plan. It drives the organizational action plan, the work plan, drives the budgets, and drives the annual reporting. And Nanaimo has done something similar. Their big plan, council strategic plan, an action plan, and then the reporting out. So it's a really, really important document in most communities. Prepare yourself for getting elected. Understand how local government works. This webinar is part of your preparation, I hope. You should attend council meetings either virtually or in person for 6 to 12 months before the election time. Prepare yourself financially because campaigning can be expensive. And build a presence in the community through social media, door knocking, volunteering with local service groups. I think I've probably covered most of these things. Support your strategic plan, stick to the plan, make sure you get good orientation at the beginning of your term of office, ask lots of questions, be honest. And I just want to say that this is a real learning job. Just my experience with most newly elected officials is they're just gobsmacked by how much they need to know. You get elected and usually the first thing you have to deal with is budget and strategic planning. It's a steep learning curve and you ought to allocate some good time to that. Don't go on holiday right after the election. It's probably a bad idea. You really need to start working. And this is a learning plan that I've developed for a couple of different organizations where, you have some post-election orientation and onboarding, you have strategic planning. UBCM is doing their conference and they have workshops going on all the time. The Local Government Leadership Academy holds a forum every year and they hold newly and returning elected officials training right after the election. And it just goes on. And then you should have your in-house sessions, committee of the whole meetings, and in-house learning going on all the time. And I'm a little over time, but there you go. That's my survey course in Local Government 101, and I'm happy to take questions.